Hi, I'm Mark Elder. I founded SIMUL8 Corporation, and I'm here to talk about some of the features in SIMUL8 2015.
And my name is Glenn Holburn. I work as a customer support advocate here at SIMUL8 Corporation, and I'm joining Mark so we can go over some of these new features. So this year, we've added these new features at request of our users. We got a lot of great feedback throughout the year on what kind of problems users had, what they needed solved, and so this year we've created features in order to do that. So let's take a look at a new feature called time interval results. And what this feature does is it allows you to analyze your KPIs at a specific time interval within your simulation.
Yes, traditionally SIMUL8's given you KPIs on the results manager that you look at the statistically correct time, which is at the end of your run when all the results have been collected. The trouble with that is it doesn't give you the drill down power of looking at individual hours or 5-minute blocks or week blocks, whatever's appropriate to you, that lets you focus in on what's happening at specific times.
Yeah, so if you look at an example like a call center, you might want to look at on an hour-by-hour basis. You want to see the staff utilization rates, and you want to see if staff are over or underutilized. You can look at other results like the amount of calls handled through a specific hour, or you can even look at something like the total amount of calls that have passed through and their waiting times. Additionally, if we want to look at something like an emergency department, we can have a look at patient waiting times over specific intervals of the day. So perhaps you know when the peak times are, and you want to see how that's actually affecting the overall average of this patient waiting time result.
Of course, this is something that you could do before, because in SIMUL8 you can add any results you like because you've got the power of our scripting language, Visual Logic there. But this lets you, in very few clicks, just say, right, I want time interval results, this is what I want it for, and I want it every hour or every week or whatever your appropriate time interval is, and the information's automatically collated for you and put into a spreadsheet so you've got a nice table with all the information ready to look at.
Let's take a look at the new time interval results feature. The first thing we're going to do here is build up a basic simulation. We've got 2 activities, 2 queues, a start and an end, and 2 resources. So we're going to allocate those resources to the activities. Next, we're going to want some results that we want to log by time interval. So I can go into the results for each of the resources, right-click on their utilization %, and that will add them to our KPIs. Once we've done that, that means that we can utilize them with the time interval results feature. I'm going to do the same thing with the endpoint, but using the work completed result. Now that we've done that, we can go back to our Home tab, go to our Results Manager, and find time interval results. We'll select options to set this up. On the bottom right-hand side, you can see an Add button, so we can add the KPIs that we've just added to our Results Manager. That means that we're going to look at these at a specific time interval within the simulation. You can see that the logging of results has been enabled, and we can modify the actual interval in whatever simulation units that you're using. In this case, we're using minutes. As the simulation runs, it's now going to collect these results. If we run this to the end, we can open back the time interval results spreadsheet and have a look at what we've just recorded. So again, on the Home tab, Results Manager dropdown, and we'll choose the View option. So the first 2 columns of the spreadsheet represent our interval, with the start and the end. The next columns are going to be whatever KPIs that you've added to be logged at a time interval. Now it is important to note that these results are not cumulative. That means that these are the results from those specific time intervals. You'll also note that this is pulled up into a SIMUL8 spreadsheet. What this also means is that you can access the spreadsheet from other parts of your simulation, and you can see this on the Data and Rules tab under the Spreadsheets option. This means that you can export these results or utilize them in other ways, as they're easily accessible from the Data and Rules tab. So now let's take a look at a new feature called scheduled maintenance. So what this feature does is it allows you to have planned breakdowns on your machines within your simulation. So you might decide that every week you want to break down a machine for 2 hours, and is that going to have a difference of doing it every other week for the 1 hour? So by using scheduled maintenance, you can quickly see how that's going to impact your results. And this is driven by the calendar feature that has always been in SIMUL8, so that you can have a date-time format on when your activities are going to break down and how often they're going to break down.
So the way this has worked traditionally in SIMUL8 is we've got the breakdown feature, but the breakdown feature is really designed for random breakdowns when you don't know something's going to happen. So to actually use it for scheduled maintenance took a lot of work. And so we've been listening to users, and they said, look, just give us a way of having a simple table where I say this particular activity shuts down on this date at this time for X hours and optionally needs a resource.
So you might use something like this in your office building. If you have downtime on your servers, you might want to see how that affects the production throughout the day, or something like a wind farm where you need to shut down windmills and perform work on them so that nothing goes wrong. So using it within SIMUL8 itself, you will enable your calendar feature. You can plug in your dates, you plug in your times, and of course you're looking there to ultimately maximize the uptime of those machines. Now let's take a look at SIMUL8 2015's scheduled maintenance feature. The first thing we're going to do is build up a simulation composed of 3 different activities. Next, we'll enable the calendar from the Data and Rules tab. By doing this, our scheduled maintenance feature will be able to reference a specific date and time that a machine needs maintenance performed on it. Now, I can double-click on the clock to bring up its properties. I'm going to have it display the date so that we can reference this in terms of when our machines are shutting down. Now access the scheduled maintenance feature from the Data and Rules tab. I'll choose a simulation object, such as Activity 1. I'll enter the start period of the maintenance in a date-time format, and I'll do the same with the end. In this example, our maintenance will start in Activity 1 at 12 o'clock and end at 3 o'clock. I'm going to choose to have this period of maintenance repeat every day, and I could allocate a resource to perform this maintenance if I wanted to. There's also visual logic if you need this to trigger other events when maintenance starts or ends. Now, if we run the simulation, we should see that at 12 o'clock, Activity 1 will stop accepting work. This is because it's gone on its maintenance. And you can see that's exactly what happened. And at 3 o'clock, it will begin accepting work again. As we've put a repeat for 1 day, let's speed up the simulation and see what happens the next day. And again, at 12 o'clock, Activity 1 has shut down for maintenance, and at 3 o'clock, it's restarted. This will happen for the rest of your simulation. So let's take a look at the variable collect feature. And what this is an extension on the current collect discipline on an activity when it routes in. But this time it is a bit different, it adds a bit more control, and it, like the name suggests, it allows you to collect a variable number of work items.
So what collect in SIMUL8's always done is to let you say, I want like 1 crate and 12 bottles, or a collection of different things from different routes into an activity. And obviously using the control scripting language you've got in SIMUL8, you've been able to manipulate that and have variable numbers. But that, of course, is something that users don't want to have to do. So we've actually put variable collect in, which lets you say, right, I want for this particular product 1 crate and 6 bottles. For the next product of a particular different type, I want 1 crate and 12 bottles, or whatever the combination is of things that you need. So it's very easy to set up a schedule that says which combinations of things you need for which products.
Sure, and we'll take a look at it in just a minute here, but essentially how this feature is now working is that you can define a label that essentially drives all of this, and that's going to be stored in a spreadsheet. And based on that label value, it's then going to look in that spreadsheet, go down the next column and see how many work items does it need to collect from a specific destination. So like your example with the bottles, in this case you might only have one type of crate that goes through and it always selects 12 bottles, but you might try different sizes. So depending on the crate that's initially going through, you would just enter that into the spreadsheet with the label information, and you will see Simulate pulling in a variable amount of bottles into the crate every time a new sort of crate goes through the system.
And of course this is all dynamically controllable because it's in a spreadsheet that can be manipulated from any different part of Simulate, so you can dynamically, if you need to, suddenly change a product partway through the run from 12 bottles to 11 bottles or whatever you need to do.
Sure, and this is something that a lot of our users have been requesting over the years, so it will allow you to easily and quickly add that sort of flexibility to your simulations, and with this sort of dynamic spreadsheet you can try playing with different numbers and see what effect that has on your simulations. So here we're going to take a look at the new variable collect feature. The first thing we're going to do is create a very simple simulation with just the 4 main objects, and we're going to add another queue at the top of our activity which will represent a storage area. So this is the queue that's going to be pulled in at variable amounts based on what work items are traveling through that activity at the time. So we'll go ahead and just name this component storage, and we're going to give it a startup value so that we can see the work items sort of drain from this queue. So we'll just give it a startup value of 100 work items. So now we're going to set up the variable collect feature itself, so we can go into the activities routing in and choose the collect option. Now you can't see it instantly, but we'll open this More tab and then you'll see a new checkbox for label and sheet. So we'll go ahead and select this. The first thing we need to do is select a label that's going to be used to drive this feature. We don't have one yet, so we can create a new label directly from this. In this, we're going to choose a variable amount of work item based on the initial work item's product type. Next, we'll set up a spreadsheet to use, and since we don't have one, we'll create one, and we will call this the component mix. So that's us telling the feature what label and what spreadsheet to use. Now we actually need to populate that spreadsheet, so we can select the View button, and you'll see that a spreadsheet is automatically formatted for us. So the first thing we want to do is put in what types of products that we're going to have through our system, and that's our label value. So we're going to have a product type of 1, 2, and 3, and they're all going to collect one work item from the leading queue, and from the component storage there you can see that we're collecting a variable amount based on what the work item's product type is. So that's our variable collect rule set up. We're just going to edit the label value for our product type. So we can do this with the actions at our start point. You can see our product type label there. And since we're just showing a basic example, we are going to make this a rounded uniform distribution between 1 and 3, meaning there's a 33% chance it's going to be either 1, 2, or 3. So now we can step through our simulation. Notice how the queue is draining at variable amounts, and this is because different product types are entering into that activity. Therefore, it's referencing the spreadsheet and choosing how many to collect. We can take a look at this in a bit more detail by stepping through the simulation instead of running it. So if we look at the current work item in Activity 1, we can see it's a label product type of 2. And if we reference back to our spreadsheet, we can see that was to collect 10. The next work item that is in the queue is product type 1, so we should see that storage queue drain by 5. And you can see it has. So again, by using the combination of the labels and this spreadsheet, we're able to build up a matrix of how many work items that we want to take from storage based on what the leading label value is. We can get a bit more in depth with this as well. Let's take a look at duplicating one of these storage bins and then how we can modify the spreadsheet to update it, so that's also using variable collect. So we're going to go back into our activity, select the View button from the routing in, and it brings up our component mix spreadsheet again, which was the spreadsheet that we used to control our variable collect. So I can go ahead and add a note on which new storage that I've added to this, and I can put in the values. In this example, only product type 3 is going to take any sort of work items from our new component storage. And if we run the simulation, you can see that certain work items will pass through the activity and not even touch component storage 2. That's because, again, we've said that only product types 3 will take 5 pieces at a time from our component storage 2. So in SIMUL8 2015, we've added a new feature to the results manager that we called the more plot. Mark, can you explain a bit more about this?
Sure. This more plot, or measure of risk and error, came out of a keynote that I saw by Barry Nelson from Purdue, where he's come up with this brilliant new way of displaying simulation results in a way that really gets the element of risk across to the end user.
Right, so what does the more plot show you that we couldn't see before within SIMUL8?
Right, well, we've always shown you what the result is, or at least what the prediction is, the long-term average of the result. So if you're being told you're going to get 500 products out of your factory, what we're telling you there is that if you actually ran this simulation for 1,000 years, the average would be, our prediction of that is it's 500 products a week. And we also give you the confidence limits on that. So if you've only run it for 25 weeks, we're showing you that our confidence is the average is between 490 and 500. But the problem is that's all about the average. It's not about what's happening in the individual weeks. And what the more plot does is it shows you how variable the individual runs are, so the individual weeks, with respect to that average. So when you're making a decision, you can base it not just on that long-term average, but also on the variability from week to week.
Right, so when would you use the more plot, essentially?
Well, what we're doing is we're still showing you, in the KPI page on the Results Manager, we're still showing you the information you had before. So you've got that long-term average, you've got the confidence limits, but you've also got a small icon that shows you a miniature of what the more plot is for that individual result. And I'm not imagining that you're going to go and look at the more plot for every single one of your results you've got on that result summary, but the things that are particularly important to you, if you're running a call center and you want to know what the individual runs are giving you for, say, utilization of a particular group of agents, you'd look at the more plot for that. So the things that are particularly vital for your decision, you'd look at. And it'll show you the confidence limits, it'll show you the long-term average, but it'll also show you the results of the individual runs in a graphical form.
Let's take a look at SIMUL8 2015's more plot feature. So you can see here that I've got a simulation already built up. I've just added some resources, and what we want to do is we want to take a look at some of our results, add them to our KPIs so that we can see them plotted out in our more plot feature. So the first thing I'll do is I'll select this endpoint, go to the results from the properties tab, and if I right click on these results, it will add them to our KPIs. We'll take work completed and average time in system. And I'll do the same for these resources. We'll take the utilization percentage of each. Now, in order for the more plot to run and display graphics, we want to run a trial, which is a series of runs. In this case, our trial will have 200 runs in it. So we can go ahead and run a trial directly from our trial setup window, and we'll be presented with our results. So you can see that on the far right-hand side, there is a new column for risk, and it's got the graph of the more plot. And of course, this is nothing new. You have the average results there for each of your KPIs. You also have the lower 95 and upper 95% confidence interval of those averages. So let's take a look at the more plot and see how it's using those results there. So the first thing to note is at the very bottom of the more plot, it shows you what result we're looking at and the number of runs in that trial. We can also see our average result there, which matches up with our KPIs in the background window there. And we can see around that average, we can see the upper 95 and lower 95% confidence interval of that average value. We also have the 5th and 95th percentile of all the runs, which are denoted by those unlikely markings there. And finally, the bars themselves, those indicate the frequency of a certain result occurring in this trial.
So what you can see here is the long-term average right there in the middle at the bottom, and you can see our 95% confidence limit on that value. But what you also get to see from this chart is the distribution of all the individual runs. So you can see that while that is the long-term average, some of the runs are significantly higher and some of the runs are way, way lower than that average. So individual weeks that are going to be run in this factory or this call center or whatever it is could be extremely variable compared with that average. So you've got the average, that's useful for decision making, but you've also got a measure of the variability, i.e. the risk. So that will help you in decision making too. So thanks for watching this. Hope you understand the features we've put in to help you in 2015.
And if you want any more information or want to read a bit more, check out our website at simulate.com/2015.